Hello and welcome to the Mental Health and Gaming Podcast. Returning this week is me, Bradley. There we go, I forgot who I was. But I can't think of anything pithy. I can't be asked to think of anything pithy to introduce him. So with me this week is Stu. How you doing, Stu?
Well, I don't need a pithy introduction because I've got all the pith with me. Or I'm taking the pith a lot of the time. But yeah, no, it's good to have you back. I did, if you heard last week's, I did both sides of the conversation at the beginning, just because I'm a little bit strange and mental. And yeah, that's all right.
Good. Made more sense than usual.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good to have you back.
Yeah, this sounds all natural so far, doesn't it? You can tell that I'm completely out of it as well. That the usual timing's gone. Do you know something else where you need some good timing, though?
What's that?
I still don't forget a segue. It's video games.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
What have you been playing, Stu?
Well, to kick off, I've been playing a game called Into the Pit, which is on Game Pass. And, yeah, it's a bit of a funky one. So it's very much in the retro-styled shooters, it was sort of subgenre that's cropped up, and there's a lot of them around. It was funny because I was thinking the other day, I can't remember the names of any of these that have come out recently that are retro-styled. I must look them up so I can reference them on the podcast. And then I completely forgot to do that. So there's a whole realm of fairly recent sort of boomer shooters, as they like to be called, which is such a misnomer. But anyway, that are around and about, and I can't remember the names of them, so I'll probably Google them as we're going along. But anyway, so what it is, it's kind of like very much in the style of, well, kind of Quake and Doom, more Quake than Doom. It's got, auto run is always on. It's got tons and tons of enemies. It's, that kind of Serious Sam thing of they're just constant, and, the earlier games that I mentioned as well, but it's kind of how to go into it. It's very it looks okay. It looks quite nice. It's got this very deliberate rough aesthetic, so that everything looks really kind of aliased and blocky, and it's got really garish colours, like a lot of the kind of first-person shooter Quake style rip-offs that were around back in the early to mid 90s. So, yeah, it's got all the looks. That's not a problem at all. It's got a couple of other problems, though. So, the first one is that they've gone, hang on, right, okay, so we're going to make this. What are we going to do to make it stand out apart from the retro styling? And they've gone, right, let's make it a roguelike. And
right.
For me, that's kind of like, oh, gee whiz, that's not a good choice. Because I think particularly in first-person shooters, they're so basic that you really need that continuous ramping up of, the weaponry and the enemies, and everything needs to be very quickly scaling up to something big. And if you look at like Doom 2016 or even Doom Eternal, there's that thing of you're constantly getting these upgrades, and it's you really need them because the way that you interact with the world has to change and has to get quicker and more adept, and the weapons incrementally help with that. Even though they get more powerful and decimate the little enemies, you're getting bigger and bigger ones all the time. But I played Into the Pit for a while, and it was just using the same stuff and then with tiny incremental little upgrades every now and again.
Yeah.
With these little stat things like RPGs, it's like, you can inflict poison on an enemy. And it's like, well, I'm kicking out so much damage at the moment, so much DPS for little enemies that doesn't matter. And it's not really applicable to the big enemies and, stuff like that. It's just kind of like, where's the value in this? And it has its own value because there's people who love that they'll go back and they'll do the same bits over and over again, a little bit like Dark Souls, and they'll like it. But for me, it's just like these are two incompatible genres, and I get no fun from that inherently. But that aside, I think there would have been more fun if the weapons were any good, but certainly to the point that I played, and this is partly because there's no rumble, there's no feedback from the weapons. They all feel airy, floaty. They all feel as if they're doing very little damage. The hit animations aren't great. They're okay when the creature finally dies, in some cases.
Yeah.
Some of them collapse. Most of them just disappear. And it's just like, that feels low effort because the engine's good and it looks pretty and it's obviously got stuff in there. But yeah, kind of very, very little in the way of physics. Very uninteresting weapons to this point. It's got this, this thing of like you're casting things from your hands rather than using guns. And if I'd been bothered to check you and done a look at these kinds of shooters in this revival at the moment, I would have given you some names as to what it's like, but I didn't. So yeah, for me, at the moment, I would love to hear other people's opinions because it's a total miss for me at the moment. It's just not firing on any of the cylinders I need it to be.
Yeah, that is a shame. I mean, once you get to a point where you needed to stand out, you wonder if there's starting to be some oversaturation in a market that was feeling fresh for a while. I remember a few years back, again, I can't remember what the game was called, but it was kind of like this old Doom style, sort of like retro feel to it, but you was kind of on this demon, like hellfire platform thing, and these enemies were coming at you from all different angles and you had to shoot them and just stay alive. And that felt really fresh, and that was literally just you, weapon, demons, shoot, get through. It wasn't roguelike, but there was no point to it apart from shooting and surviving high scores or whatever. And just by being simple and it stood out. And I think there's so many of these Doom-inspired, oh, look, we should do this and keep all the aesthetics games now that, yeah, I don't look at this and go, oh, no, I want to play a roguelike version of this at all. So I think these sort of games need to live and die on their shooting and just their overall fun, not what they can shoehorn in to stand out.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I could be in a minority. I suspect I'm not, though, because as I say, even if you love the way that it's constructed in terms of progression, that kind of feedback from attacks is just not there, and you remember how good the both the animations on the weapons are in Doom, and the noise that they make and the hit reactions. They never get boring. The different enemies would collapse into piles of goo, or the heads would explode, and you need that kind of feedback if you're playing something bananas. And the other thing which I hadn't mentioned is, so far the levels are that typical sort of, they're kind of like all on one level with like, they look like cubicles in an office. They're blocked by walls.
Yeah.
A bit like the original Wolfenstein. And they've got like raised areas that you can jump onto. But other than that, there's not really anything else in terms of level design, because they're clearly meant to be either easily put together or procedurally generated, or a combination of the two. And that just makes it, for me, really, really boring. The level design, if you think about it, almost the best thing about Doom and Quake are the amazing levels and the verticality. And in the case of Quake, not Doom. So, for me, it's like, why come back 30 years later, or, 26, 27 years later with something that's so inferior to what it's trying to mimic?
Yeah, and actually, one thing you've just made me think about is the Doom and Quake. When I played those, I was playing those on controllers or keyboard. They don't have rumble feedback, yet those games made you you were getting feedback.
Yeah.
You felt like when you shot a shotgun in Doom, you were shooting a shotgun. So if you can't do that in your game with all the modern quality of life improvements, then, yeah.
Yeah. The hands that are held out in front of you, they're reasonably well animated, but there's just a handful of animations on them.
Yeah.
And very little that you can do. And I think you really need... And they're like, that's in a way deliberate because it's a retro shooter. But as I say, it's that part of it, that side of it, seems to be mimicking the the stuff that came out in the wake of the classics rather than the classics themselves.
Yeah.
And I'd just be like, take this back into development, take it away for a year, look for another round of funding, add some more stuff to it, and just bulk it out into a proper game. Hopefully they can do that in a sequel. They'll obviously have had a shed load of money because it's on Game Pass, so Microsoft have paid up front and they've covered their nut already, no problem. So yeah, fingers crossed for a better sequel from them.
Yeah, good. So I've been playing one game in the last week or so. I was laying there and I thought, these could be my last days. So I'm going to try some drugs.
Good plan.
I thought, I've never had acid before. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to take some ecstasy. Couldn't find a dealer, so I made do with ecstasy on the Switch.
Hey.
I've spoke about the game before, ecstasy, and how much I really enjoy it. It's a cross between Tetris and Lumines, and it's just a really good mix of the two. It doesn't do anything, I think, outstanding to go, oh look, we're trying to be overly clever. It's got a Tetris-sized well. It hasn't got the full screen Lumines well, which I liked. It allows me to concentrate on that certain area, and you basically match the colours, get a group of 4 to start a chain, try and build up big chains to get big scores to the beat, things like that. Yeah, so you chain your scores. Again, anyone who's played Lumines knows exactly how that works. You've got like different types of tetromino shapes. And you don't rotate the pieces, you rotate the colours within the pieces, and then they drop. What is the little bit you do have to get used to is they come down in a shape, but they fill all gaps. Rather than sort of like staying in like a layer, they kind of fill all gaps. So you've got to get that disconnect from Tetris there as well.
Yeah.
But it works really well. Various different modes in there. So you've got like this beat mode, time attack, etc., etc. All just variants of of the same thing, but it gives enough variety in there. I think I spent most of my time in the beat mode, but it's really, really good fun. Overall, works really well on the Switch, really well. Great conversion. Got all the accessibility options, so there's different colourblind options. You can turn on and off screen effects, all those kind of things, which is really, really appreciative. I was able to play it with poor vision, which is really good. But I've just spent, I've managed to spend probably a couple of hours with it over a few days, which might not sound like a lot, but we'll come to a reason why that's a lot in a little bit. But yeah, really enjoyed it. The one thing I must point out, though, unfortunately, is that it does need some work on the user interface.
Right.
I can't remember noticing it on PC, but the way it selects menu options, it's very hard to know whether you're selecting the right one or not. So it does that thing where it just changes the colour of confirm or deny, for example. So cancel or select is like it goes red, but it doesn't indicate really what one you've actually got or which one's which. So you're kind of guessing. I just have to hope you've got it right. So just one little like UI markers would help really with that. But that, again, they're not the only ones that make that mistake. The accessibility options on the whole are absolutely fantastic. But just that one little thing, unfortunately, is a little bit of a pain in the arse. But the game itself, absolutely superb. And I'll be playing a lot more. And I'll speak about it again properly when I've got all my wits about me.
It's one I definitely want to pick up. Yeah, I definitely want to have a go with it on the Switch, like you say. But it's just a handheld kind of a game. Those things, they really are. And,
yes.
Eventually I'd like to have that and Mixolumia on there as well. I was talking last week about playing Tetris Effect Connected on the Switch, which I bought, and
well done.
Yeah. Oh, you'll listen back. You'll hear what I say about that situation. But yeah, no, it's fantastic, and it's just such a good pick up and play thing that gives you that little spike of dopamine, even though I'm absolute garbage at it. I struggle so much, and it's there's a couple of things, and I don't know if this is something I should ask offline rather than online, but I'll go for it anyway. Is like, how you what's your recommendation for using the zone mode? Because I really struggle to get the most out of it.
On Tetris, is this? Sorry.
Yes, sorry.
I generally, again, I'm not very good at scoring on journey mode, but what I generally tend to do is build it up, then make sure I can build up enough of a well where I can then activate it and just put pieces down. So a two wide or 3 wide well, where I can then make sure I'm going right in, and then building that up quickly. And what you want to try and do is do at least one zone per round. And I generally find it can work well by getting it towards the end. So when you're at about maybe 33 out of 35 clears, for example, will be to activate it then. So that your final bits are just to pick up any loose ends at the end.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I'm way behind that. I'm having to use it in the later levels as just a way to survive, because it's just anything over level 10 for me, speed level 10. I just find it practically impossible. I know that you don't have that super glue effect now, where once it hits the row below, it doesn't stick to it immediately, and you can still move them around a bit.
Yeah.
But even with that, I'm just not fast enough. I just can't react quickly enough. So, I have to use zone over level 10 just to slow things down.
Yeah, see, I find that really weird, because I'm at a point where until it gets to level 10, I don't find it tedious. Tetris, but I need it to be at that level to sort of like get what I think is the proper Tetris feeding from it.
Oh yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah, totally. Because there's a lot of strategy involved that I just don't have, and I'm pretty good at like keeping my eye out on what's coming next, and maybe banking the right kind of shapes rather than the wrong ones.
Yeah.
But even so, I'm not good at kind of wiggling them into weird spaces, I think there's a big load of strategy around that these days, isn't there?
Yeah, your T spins, your S spins, your Z spins, yeah.
Yeah, that stuff, what you said.
Yeah, no, it's, Tetris, you try and explain it to people who have only ever played like on Game Boy and stuff like that, and just go, this is not what Tetris is anymore. It is a totally different thing, but it's still the same game at its core. It's the T-spins I could do naturally, like T-spin doubles. You look for moments to do those, and you quickly set those up, and then you got your treble setups and stuff like that. See, I'm not at a level yet where I can preset those up middle of a game. I'm waiting for opportunities for those to come in. I'm nowhere near being sort of like a top player of Tetris. I love it. I'll play it every day if I could, all day. But I'm nowhere near being one of the top players. And even I look at the reaction speeds of some people, just go, how is your brain and fingers doing that? So I'd imagine if for some. I can't get my head around that some people could probably look at me playing level 10 speed and thinking the exact same thing, because I think I'm super slow at it.
Yeah, it's mad, isn't it? I was watching some Games Done Quick stuff, and it was Summoning Salt, which is a channel on YouTube that goes through how people got to where they are with speedruns, and where the scene is with a particular game, and it goes game by game, and it's really good. And there was one which I'm gonna say was Contra, and there were exploits that you could only do to beat things in like a certain time if you were able to hit the button without auto fire at greater than 12 times per second.
Jesus.
And There were people who could do it, and you know, you wouldn't necessarily believe that unless you saw it, but there was video of these, and there is. You can look, you can see. There's video of people doing it, and you're just like, how is their hand even moving at that speed and that consistently? Because it's to hit sort of frame patterns in the game and to match the frame pacing. And, you know, it not only has to be that fast, it has to be in a rhythm so that it's correct. And it's just like, surely that's physically impossible. And these are the equivalent of people who are like Olympians, but in gaming.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with, you know, with Tetris and Tetris Effect.
Yeah, I still think the most craziest thing I've ever seen is people playing StarCraft at the top level.
Oh, really? Yeah.
You watch their fingers go on that keyboard. You just go, oh, how?
Mental.
Especially when it's a strategy game as well. So yeah, that blows my mind still, watching people play StarCraft at the top level.
Cool, I'll have to check that out.
But yeah, that's it from me from games. So whatever you've got left.
Well, the main one is a game that I've had my eye on for a little while, and I knew it was getting released, and then it hit, and I bought it immediately, which is a game called ARK-ADE on VR. It's ARK, ARK-ADE. It's getting there on like one of the worst titles for a game ever made, and you know, never mind. Luckily, the game itself is very, very good so far. So what it is it's a fairly blatant Tron kind of rip-off, like styled game, and you start the game off and, you know, you're presented with an arcade cabinet with a gun, and you walk up and pick up the gun, and then you're sucked into the arcade game itself, and then everything is Tron styled. And what you have to do is you've got full free movement, it's not on rails, and it's a shooter, and you have to also, as well as shooting the enemies, protect this kind of little floating ball, you know, a bit like the Guilty... Is it called Guilty Spark from Halo? The little floaty robot thing that follows you around.
Yeah.
And yeah, you kind of have to protect that as well as protect yourself, which is good. It's not a kind of awkward rescue mission style scenario because it can take a lot of damage, but it does mean that you have to pay attention to it and stuff like that, and the enemies fire in different directions. It's got you can shoot the enemy bullets for extra points and to, you know, for defense, and you get more for headshots, more points for headshots, and also you've got bullet time. You can get bullet time, and you can also shoot, like, you shoot icons that appear in the level, and one of them's bullet time, extra health, different weapons. So in that regard, it's a little bit like a on rails Time Crisis style light gun shooter.
Yeah.
But as I say, you know, it's got full movement. And what sort of differentiates it from like Robo Recall, which is like probably the best VR shooter that I've played, is partly the graphics, you know, it's like that Tron style.
Yeah.
But also it's kind of like a score based thing, and it's got like quite interesting level design. It's got like destructible walls, and obviously you can hide behind everything in full VR, and it's got like little dips and nooks and crannies, and it's got gun turrets, and it's got all sorts. It really has a very, very strong Tron vibe. It uses the aesthetic, but it doesn't rip off the actual designs of characters. It's got its own kind of enemy character design that has its own fresh feeling sort of thing. So it kind of nicks the idea of Tron, but then it takes it in a different direction. And another great thing is that it has, similar to rail shooters, it has enemies in the background that flash past that if you manage to hit them you get extra points for, which keeps things a bit fresh, you know, and you get really good bonuses for hitting them, and you can use your bullet time to do that. And then at the end of the level, because I'm only on the first level at the moment, you get to fight, I think it's called ARK, and I think AID is the little one, the little thing you're protecting. And it's like a giant skull and crossbones, with the crossbones being like Dr. Octopus's arms, and they fire weapons at you. And knocking them back on health reveals a weak spot, and blah, blah, blah. I think that it's designed so that the health on that thing is immense, because I was on him for about 10 minutes or more before I died.
Yeah. Got
through a load of rounds and he was still alive. So it's designed to be really, really tough, massive boss battle, you know. Anyway, it's one of those that I think if it was just a regular FPS or even a light gun shooter, it'd still be quite good. But in VR, it's really excellent. It uses the space really well. The fact that it's full traversal is excellent. You've got loads of comfort settings, so you can sit or stand, and you can have different movement, so that you don't get sick. And it's got all that built in. It's got loads of aim methods. The reload method is to flick your gun either up or down. So yeah, it's nice. It's got a good blend of physical interactivity along with the regular gameplay. So far, yeah, it's a real good. It's only in early access, and there's a couple of things I'm going to feedback on, I think, that need improving, but generally, yeah, good stuff.
And it's a VR only, isn't it, that one?
Yeah, fully VR only, and it's not available on Quest. It needs a full PC VR setup.
Oh, good. No, I'll be interested to hear more of that when it comes out of early access.
Yeah, there's not many coming out. I think this is from a very small team, might even be a single guy, but at least a very small team. And there are very few now games coming out for full PC VR that aren't designed for Quest first and foremost, or are just like Quest fully. So like Resident Evil 4 has just got a Quest release, and it's not available on the Rift for me, which is disappointing because I'd like to play that in VR. But yeah, there's very few. I had my eye on that. I've got my eye on a hoverbike racing game, and also there's Lone Echo 2, and I reviewed Lone Echo on here a few months ago. Like, I bought it when it was cheap, and that's absolutely superb. And I was going to hold off on getting Lone Echo 2 just to give myself a bit of space between the original and the sequel, but I also want to see whether it's going to fall into my games of the year, so I've got to play it before the end of the year. So there's three fairly major games that I'm going to have a go on. But yeah, it's a kind of a bit of a arid wasteland at the moment.
Yeah, which is a shame if you're into VR. It still sounds like a minefield to me anyway. So yeah, I'm hoping maybe down the line it'll be more accessible to people like me as well.
Yes, and who knows where it's going with that. Yeah, but hopefully it'll be something. As I said a few weeks ago, I'm really hoping that the PS5's VR solution really takes off, because I think that's the key now. If it takes foothold there and gets a bigger audience and big impact, then we'll start seeing Microsoft take notice, and then we'll start to see it, hopefully more devices coming out that you can actually play proper games on. Yeah, I think that'll be it. Yeah, the PS5 one, I think, is massive in terms of public acceptance. Yeah, I'm very, very I'm very unsure of how it's going to be received. It's going to depend a lot on levels of boredom, price point, exactly when it drops in the market, how many PS5s are actually out there and available, because it's still really low. 4. So yeah, it's got a lot of things to overcome, a big hill to climb, but fingers crossed. Fair enough. Right, I'm going to force us to move on now, because I'm beginning to get a bit... Ugh. Yeah, of course. So, as Stu probably had mentioned last week, I wasn't here. I've been hit with COVID, and it's not been mild. I almost feel bad saying it's not been mild, because obviously people have had it much, much worse, hospitalisation and death and things like that. But yeah, I've not had it mild. The entire household, the entire flat got hit with it. Lucas had it really mild, barely even noticed he had it. Edith was down in the dumps and slept a fair amount, but aside from that, it wasn't too bad. And Lo got it quite badly, where she was having to sort of like rest up, and she had the headaches, the gut issues and things like that. And then on the Saturday, I felt really bad. I had a couple of symptoms beforehand, but was still testing negative. On the Saturday, I woke up and just felt awful, and took the lateral flow, and that came up positive. So I took a PCR and took that down to the post box. Got back, and I was just wiped out from then on. I'm trying to remember sort of like the order of how things went, and I can't.
I was delirious at points over the past 10, 12 days. I've had every single pain imaginable. I've been barely able to breathe. You remember, Stu, I think you spoke to me at one point last week.
Yeah.
I could barely get 2 words out.
Yeah.
Which you thought was good. That would be the best time for us to do a podcast together, you said. You said that would be great.
I was quite disappointed that you didn't do it, to be honest. Yeah. Thought you were a bit of a wimp, but yeah.
But yeah, I was barely able to breathe, couldn't talk. I was coughing constantly. And the worst part is, do you know when you have diarrhea, and you're like, oh, is that or is that not? And so you go, I better get to the toilet just in case. That's the worst I've ever had it before, and I always assumed that was struggling to control your bowels. No, right, with COVID, I for the first time could not control my bowels at all.
Oh, blimey.
Like, again, Stu, you can put in trigger warnings or anything when you edit as to where this goes, but literal was just pouring out of me. But I couldn't do anything about it whatsoever. No warnings, no anything to get to the toilet. It's, I mean, honestly, it was so free-flowing, it was almost like the Conservatives had voted for it to start coming out of me.
Bloody Tories.
Yeah, topical humour still. There you go. So I woke up one night and I was like, oh, shit. Tried to get myself to the toilet, but I had no balance, no strength. So I was falling over, pulling myself to the toilet, and it was just absolutely everywhere. It was embarrassing, but you're also too ill to care at the same time.
Yeah.
I just, at that point, I was like, what is absolutely wrong with me? There was times where I felt like I don't know if I'm going to die or not.
Yeah.
Did not know whether I was going to be able to continue. You just cannot see. You cannot see an end to the pain. You cannot see an end to any of it, feeling bad, and then I couldn't eat. So what was really weird, I could eat liquid, is the only way I could put it. So soup I could just about do, but I was still having to chew soup to convince myself to swallow it.
Yeah.
I tried, early on, having sort of like some macaroni cheese. It was like, it's like soft, it's warm, it's wettish, you know, it's got some lubricant to it. And you're chewing stuff down beyond the paste before your brain or your body's going, okay, I will accept this into the throat now. Not because you've got a sore throat or anything like that. It's just your body's going, nope.
Yeah.
Then the pain, the headaches that were there with it, the sickness that's there with it, everything your body does is just like, it's just going, yeah, we're going to put everything wrong with you. I originally compared it to when I had the flu when I was 19, like proper flu, not what people call flu, but the actual knocking you out, you might die flu.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is probably the closest I've been to that. I'm not going to lie, it was worse.
Wow.
Absolutely worse. And I've started to get better over the past few days. But what your body then does to you is, it goes, right, okay, you started to get better with these bits. Feeling and started to feel better. You're like, yeah, I'm starting to feel a bit better, body. Thank you. Okay, right. I'm then going to take a shovel to your face because you've never suffered with your sinuses before, have you, Brad? And I'm like, no, I've never suffered with my sinuses before. Never. Okay, right. Now you're going to suffer with your sinuses.
Oh, lovely.
I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. I've never won, like, when I've heard people talk about sinus issues before, and I've not belittled them, I've just never really understood because I've never suffered with them. Jesus Christ. Oh my God, that is a horrible pain.
Yeah.
You just can't do anything about it because of where it is. It's just like, I was like, oh, no. And it's like, why are you punishing me with this now? I've probably missed things out, but it's the worst. It is the absolute worst.
Bloody hell. I mean, I've had stuff Like, I had the flu, like proper flu, like you said. I've actually had that twice, unfortunately. Yeah. Well, lucky me. And that was horrendous. Like, the pain, just every joint aching. That was horrible. And I've had gastroenteritis, which they used to call gastric flu, which is similar to what you're talking about, the bathroom situation. I couldn't eat for a week, practically. But I've never had all of that together along with the sinus pain. I just can't imagine what it's like. I'd have been crying out for the morphine at that point. I really would.
Apparently, but that still wasn't enough to obviously be in hospital. So what level the people are at when they go to hospital, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's I wouldn't wish this on anyone at all. But I'm going to try and fit in just a little bit of a rant, if I may, Stu.
Please do.
Which is deniers, anti-vaxxers, anti-freedom maskers and things like that. No. Right, screw you all. Screw you all. This could have been nearly done and dusted by now if you'd all helped, like, just joined in, followed the rules, helped with all of this. We could have been almost clear of this, had less issues than we're having now. I am under no illusion. If I hadn't had both my jabs, I would have at least been in hospital with this, and that's kept me out of hospital. And I wanted to stay out of hospital because I didn't want to put extra pressure on the NHS, because I know they're starting to burst again with all this. If you are an anti-vaxxer, I don't think we've got many of those listening to us, but if you are an anti-vaxxer, screw you. It's not even just think about it. No, okay, you're making this worse. You are making it so that this will not go. The variants are going to get worse. They're going to take over worse. It's going to kill more people. More people are going to be suffering from this. Not let's just get back to normal. There is no getting back to normal at the moment. I'm knowing more and more people who are getting this, who are getting hit by COVID, who have done everything they can to stay safe, to keep others safe, and are now getting hit by this because of selfish assholes who can't be bothered to help the rest because they're so filled up with conspiracy bullshit. You know, wearing masks is taken away from our freedoms. No, it isn't. Right, sorry if you've got to bleep any of this, but no, off. Is there any conspiracy? No way does wearing a mask take away your poxy freedoms. Okay, what takes away your freedom is being laid up in your bed for 12 days solid nearly because you can't move. Everything hurts, everything aches, you can't get out, you can't do a single thing. What takes away your freedoms is my partner not being able to work for 10 days but not get any extra money for it because the money's gone from it. The government doesn't care. 10 days work lost for a family with no money is a lot. All because you don't want to wear a poxy mask because you don't want to take the vaccine. Right, now I'm not aiming this at people who do have genuine like asthma issues and stuff like that. I get that. Right, but there's a difference between I can't wear a mask because of whatever, but still then social distancing. That's fine. My partner struggles with her asthma. She tries not to. She wears a mask when she absolutely has to because she does struggle with breathing. But she social distances, not this full-on bullshit of where's my freedoms. None of that. No, sorry. And COVID deniers, they can off the worst. You cannot deny this is here, and I can't believe people still are. You have made this harder and harder and harder, and it's only going to get worse if you do not pull your heads out of your
I don't think there are hopefully very many, like you say, people who would listen to this podcast who wouldn't have it done, you know, wouldn't have the vaccine. But, you know, I think the government, you know, takes so much blame for just not informing the public properly and not just making sure that there's that you have to kind of propagandize, you know. It's like people who are on our side of it often say, you know, well, imagine what it'd be like in World War II if you're like, oh, the government can't tell me to black out my lights and they can't stop me going out to the pub and going into the shelter and all this. It's like, yeah, put it in that perspective. The fact that the government put so much effort into propagandizing things, you know, of keeping the populace safe, that it it meant that you had to be a part of it or you were socially excluded because you were an outlier. And I don't think there's been anywhere near enough of that. And that's absolutely terrible. But people do have to take personal responsibility, you know. Denial is a ridiculous thing. I understand you being frightened, but it just hurts everybody. You know, you've got to get over your fear and just go with it and try and help rather than being a hindrance. Be an adult, take responsibility. And, you know, a lot of these adults will have kids and your kids are going to suffer. So, yeah, I know. I totally understand where you're coming from with all of that.
Yeah, it's I could not wish this on anybody at all. And honestly, I think until you've suffered it, you really, I don't think you can get an understanding of just honestly how bad it is. And it's the fact it does affect different people differently. It's, you know, me, my partner, my two kids all suffered different levels. And I think I'm done. Sorry.
Yeah. Yep. No, I totally understand. Yeah. So we'll leave it there. Obviously, you know, very difficult time. Very, very good of Brad and very brave of him to come on and speak on the podcast and talk about it. So really appreciate that and take away what you can from it, listeners. And, you know, if you have any questions, make sure you look out there for answers from the right people. YouTube is not an educational resource, as useful as it may be. You know, make sure you're looking at stuff that is properly peer-reviewed. Make sure that you're following links that are to legitimate places when you're gaining your information. But your baseline should always be, this is happening, it's happening to everybody, and we all have to pull together to make it, you know, to minimise the impact as much as possible. If you can feel like you need to look into that more, go ahead, but make sure you're looking at the right resources. Conspiracy theories are just damaging to everybody. Again, as I say, 99% of our audience won't have to take this into consideration, but for perhaps the 1% who do, please do think on with that and have a look into it properly and ask your doctor if you've got any real questions about that as well. But in the meantime, particularly at this time, stay safe and stay sane.